Welcome to Uniquely Female Troubles. My name is Leslie Wells, and today I want to talk about some things Aristotle said about women. And Aristotle was born in 384 BCE, and he died in 322 BCE. And the first question that might come to your mind is, who cares what a guy who lived that long ago said about women? And that's a valid question. But the problem about him is he's considered the father of modern logic. And he was a very influential figure. And his influence was very strong up until the Enlightenment period. And the Enlightenment period started in about 1685. So if you can imagine how many centuries the things that this guy taught were considered very important by people. It's kind of mind-boggling. And of course, he was a genius, just like the other people, like the other ancient Greek philosophers such as Plato, Socrates, and Aristotle. He was actually a student of Plato, and he was a teacher of Alexander the Great, who wasn't necessarily a philosopher, but he conquered a lot of the ancient world. Alexander the Great was a king in ancient Greece, and he conquered all the way to India. And so he had quite a bit of influence in the ancient world. And then, therefore, the things he learned from Aristotle were also very influential. And all the way up until, like I said, until the Enlightenment period, the things he said and taught were considered very authoritative by scholars and by clergymen. So if you think about it, he was an important person, and he actually still does influence subtly and not necessarily directly, but he does influence us today. And the first thing I'm gonna just read two quotes by him. The first one is, "The female is a female by virtue of a certain lack of qualities. We should regard the female nature as afflicted with a natural defectiveness." So we're females because we lack. And what we lack are certain body parts that men have. And it was a very common belief in ancient Greece and ancient Rome that women were incomplete humans because we didn't have some body parts that men quite obviously have, which is pretty, to me, hilarious. Because if we didn't have a uterus, if we didn't have ovaries, and if we didn't have fallopian tubes, and if we didn't have a vagina, we would not be able to have babies. And men can't have babies. Are they incomplete humans because they don't have the parts I just named? But the fact is those parts are internal. The parts that men have that we don't have are external. And I don't know how much the ancient Greeks knew about biology. I do know that there were time periods, and I think most of the ancient time, it was not considered okay to cut open bodies and see what was inside of them. And I don't know for sure that that wasn't okay in ancient Greece, but I do know that even Leonardo da Vinci had a hard time getting bodies to dissect because that was just not considered okay. That was considered a defilement. And so if you think about it, it's like we were just men missing certain parts. And not only did they think we were missing body parts, they thought we were missing a lot of our minds. We didn't have the rational logic like they had. We were not at all as good as men. And men were considered definitely superior in every way, not just strength, not just physically. And Women at that time were lumped in with children and slaves. We did not have the same rights as men, free men, even though we're talking women who were not slaves. That's a whole nother category. But right now, just for the sake of this discussion, we're not talking about women who were slaves. We're talking about women who were free. We're talking about women who were probably rich through their dads or through their husbands, but they were not rich on their own because that was not something that was allowed. They were not allowed to take part in any kind of public sphere, and men were meant to rule and women were meant to be ruled. We were considered deformed males. That was the way of thinking back then. And Aristotle taught that. He was a very influential figure. Aristotle's thinking influenced people for more than 1,000 years. And he influenced people that influence thinkers now. There are still people who are influenced by Aristotle. So it's very interesting to think about the fact that someone that lived that long ago and who, yes, was a genius in many ways, but was ignorant of many things as well, just because of when he lived and what was known when he lived, that his thinking is still influencing people today. Another one of his quotes was, "A proper wife should be as obedient as a slave." And then you would say, well, was he ever married? And yes, he was. He was married and he had a daughter. And I'm not saying, I don't know anything about how Aristotle treated women. He might have been a great husband. He might have been a nice person. I don't know. The only thing I do know is that he taught generations and centuries of people, men and women, who were learned and who often knew Greek and could read his writings in the original language, that women were incomplete men, women were defective men, women were not fully human, because what a man was what a human was. And since women did not have everything that men had, we were considered incomplete humans. So of course we didn't have human rights, because we're not even really all the way human. We're only partially human. So, and considering how long his influence lasted, that he's called the father of Western logic, I think it's very important to think about and to know what he taught about women, and that so many, many, many thousands of people learned from him and believed. So, thank you for listening. Please subscribe to this channel. Please give this video a thumbs up, and I would love to hear what you think about this. I want to turn this from a monologue into a dialogue. I would love that. I really appreciate you guys listening to what I have to say and finding out what I think, but I want to know what you guys think. So please let me know in the comments. Thank you very much. Have a good day.